The dust from the stagecoach wheels had barely settled when Margaret Catherine saw her father shake hands with Vincent Halloway, sealing an agreement she had never been consulted about. And in that moment, she knew she would rather die in the desert than become the wife of a man 30 years her senior who looked at her like she was property to be acquired. She was 21 years old, standing in the parlor of their ranch house outside Santa Fe, New Mexico territory, in the spring of 1878, and everything she had imagined for her future crumbled like adobe in a rainstorm. "It is settled then," her father said, his voice carrying that tone of finality she had learned to dread. "The wedding will be in 2 weeks. That should give us time to make the proper arrangements." Margaret's hands trembled as she gripped the fabric of her skirts. Vincent Halloway was a wealthy cattle baron from Texas, a widower with grown children older than she was, and he smiled at her with yellowed teeth that made her stomach turn. "I look forward to making you my bride, Miss Catherine," he said, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. She opened her mouth to protest, but her father's sharp glance silenced her. She had tried reasoning with him for weeks since he first mentioned this arrangement, but he insisted the marriage would secure their family's financial future. Her mother had died 3 years ago, and without her gentle influence, her father had become harder, more concerned with business than with his daughter's happiness. That night, Margaret lay awake in her bed, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. She could not go through with this marriage. She would not. By the time the sun began to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold, she had made her decision. She would run. Margaret spent the next 3 days carefully planning her escape. She gathered supplies in small amounts that would not be noticed, hiding them in an old saddlebag beneath her bed. She took jerky, hardtack, a canteen, matches, and what little money she had managed to save over the years. She knew the risks of a woman traveling alone through the territory, but she also knew what awaited her if she stayed. On the 4th night, when the moon was nothing but a sliver in the sky, Margaret dressed in her brother's old clothes that she had kept hidden since his death from fever 2 years prior. She braided her long dark hair and tucked it under a hat, hoping that from a distance she might pass for a young man. She left a note on her pillow, brief and apologetic, then slipped out through her window and made her way to the stables. Her heart hammered in her chest as she saddled her mare, Rosie, a gentle chestnut horse with a white star on her forehead. Every sound seemed amplified in the darkness, every creak of leather like a thunderclap. But no one came, no alarm was raised, and within minutes she was riding away from the only home she had ever known. Margaret rode north and west, avoiding the main roads where she might be spotted. She had heard of Mormon settlements in Utah Territory, places where a woman might find work and start over. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all she had. The landscape changed as she traveled, the rolling hills giving way to more rugged terrain, mesas rising like ancient monuments against the endless sky. She had been traveling for 5 days, rationing her supplies and sleeping in hidden arroyos, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Her blood turned to ice. She urged Rosie into a faster pace, but the horse was tired and the riders behind her were gaining. She recognized the voices calling out to her, her father's foreman and 2 ranch hands he must have sent to bring her back. "Miss Catherine, stop running. Your father wants you home." Margaret kicked her heels against Rosie's sides, but the mare stumbled on the rocky ground, nearly throwing her. The riders were close now, close enough that she could hear the jingle of their spurs and the heavy breathing of their horses. She crested a ridge and saw below her a narrow valley with what looked like a small ranch nestled against the base of red rock cliffs. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see a corral with several horses. It was her only chance. She guided Rosie down the steep slope, rocks sliding under the mare's hooves. Behind her, the foreman shouted, "She is headed for that ranch, cut her off." Margaret reached the valley floor and galloped toward the ranch buildings, her hat flying off and her long braid whipping behind her. A man emerged from the barn, tall and lean, with dark hair and a weathered face that spoke of years working under the sun. He wore a dusty shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms, and his hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip as he assessed the situation. "Please." Margaret cried out as she pulled Rosie to a sliding stop in front of him. "Please help me. They are trying to take me back to a marriage I never agreed to. The cowboy's eyes, she noticed even in her panic, were a startling blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. He looked past her at the three riders approaching fast, then back at her flushed face and desperate expression. Something in his features shifted, a hardening of his jaw that suggested he had made a decision. "Get in the barn," he said, his voice calm and steady. "There is a storage room in the back, behind the feed sacks. Hide there and do not make a sound." Margaret did not waste time questioning him. She dismounted and ran into the barn, leading Rosie with her. The interior was dim and smelled of hay and horses and leather. She found the storage room exactly where he said it would be and squeezed into the small space with her mare, pulling feed sacks across the opening. Through the cracks in the barn wall, she could hear the riders arrive, their horses snorting and stamping. "Afternoon," the cowboy said, and Margaret was struck by how relaxed he sounded. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "We are looking for a woman," her father's foreman said. Margaret recognized his voice as belonging to Tom Brewster, a hard man who had worked for her father for a decade. "Dark hair, riding a chestnut mare. We saw her come this way. She is a runaway, property of her father." "A woman is not property," the cowboy said, and Margaret heard the edge in his voice now, like steel wrapped in velvet. "That is not your concern," Brewster snapped. "Her father wants her back. She is promised in marriage, and she ran away like a foolish child. Now where is she?" "I have not seen anyone matching that description," the cowboy said. "You are welcome to look around, but I should tell you, I do not take kindly to men who chase down women and call it righteous." There was a long pause, and Margaret held her breath, pressing her hand against Rosie's nose to keep the mare quiet. "You are lying," one of the other men said. "We saw her ride right up to this place." "Then perhaps she kept riding," the cowboy suggested. "This valley connects to a pass that leads west. Maybe you should try looking there instead of standing around my property making accusations." Margaret heard the sound of a boot hitting the ground as someone dismounted. "I think we will have a look in that barn," Brewster said. "I think you will get back on your horse and leave my property," the cowboy replied, and now his voice was hard as granite. "I have told you I have not seen your runaway bride. I have been alone here all day working my ranch. Now you can take my word as a man, or you can call me a liar and we can settle this another way." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Margaret's heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. "You know who her father is?" Brewster asked. "Richard Catherine. He owns one of the biggest spreads in New Mexico territory. He has money and influence, and he will not forget if you stand in the way of getting his daughter back." "I do not know your Richard Catherine," the cowboy said, "and I do not much care about his money or influence. This is Utah territory, and you are a long way from home. Now I have asked you politely to leave. I will not ask again." Margaret heard the unmistakable sound of a hammer being cocked on a revolver. Another long silence, then Brewster spoke again, his voice tight with anger. "This is not over. If we find out you are hiding her, there will be consequences." "I will take my chances," the cowboy said. The men remounted, and Margaret listened as the hoofbeats gradually faded into the distance. She waited, barely breathing, until she heard footsteps approaching the barn. "They are gone," the cowboy said from outside the storage room. "You can come out now." Margaret pushed aside the feed sacks and emerged, blinking in the light that streamed through the barn door. The cowboy stood there, his revolver now holstered, studying her with those striking eyes. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice shaking with relief. "I do not know what they would have done if you had not helped me. They would have taken you back," he said simply. "Are you really running from a forced marriage?" "Yes," Margaret said, meeting his gaze. "My father arranged it without my consent. The man is old enough to be my grandfather, and I will not marry him." The cowboy nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "My name is August Garrett," he said. "This is my ranch, such as it is. Small operation, just me and a few horses and cattle." "Margaret Catherine," she replied, "though I suppose you already know that from listening to them." "You need to understand something, Miss Catherine," August said, his expression serious. "Those men believed me this time, but they will be back. They will talk to people in the nearest towns, ask questions. When they do not find you on the Western Pass, they will come back here with more men and search the place properly. Your father sounds like a man with resources." Margaret felt her hope deflating. "Then I should leave. I should not have put you in danger." "I did not say that," August interrupted. "I said they would come back. That means we need to be smart about this. If you ride out of here alone, they will find you within a day." You have been lucky so far, but a woman traveling alone through this country would not stay lucky for long. Then what do you suggest? Margaret asked. August was quiet for a moment, then said, You stay here out of sight while I go into town and get a sense of what is happening. If your father's men are asking around, I will know. We can figure out our next move based on that. Our next move, Margaret repeated. Why would you help me? You do not know me. This is not your problem. August looked at her steadily. My mother was forced into a marriage when she was 16, he said quietly. She spent 20 miserable years with a man who treated her like a servant and worse. When she finally got free of him, she told me that no woman should ever be forced to give herself to a man she does not choose. So yes, Miss Catherine, I will help you. Not because I know you, but because it is the right thing to do. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She had not cried since she left home, had not allowed herself that weakness, but the kindness in this stranger's words nearly undid her. Thank you, she whispered. You can stay in the house, August said. It is not much, but it is more comfortable than the barn. If anyone comes by, you hide in the root cellar. There is an entrance beneath the kitchen floorboards. Can you cook? The question was so unexpected that Margaret almost laughed. Yes, I can cook. Good. I am tired of my own cooking, August said, and there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Come on, I will show you inside. You look like you could use a decent meal and a good night's sleep. The house was indeed small, just 3 rooms, a kitchen and living area combined, a bedroom and a storage room. But it was clean and well maintained, with sturdy furniture that looked handmade and windows that let in the afternoon light. August showed her the root cellar, a small space accessed by lifting a section of the kitchen floor, where potatoes and other supplies were stored in the cool darkness. Stay away from the windows, he cautioned, and keep your horse in the barn out of sight. I will tell anyone who asks that she belongs to a ranch hand who is out checking the stock. Margaret nodded, taking in all the details. August put together a simple meal of beans and cornbread, and they ate in silence, the awkwardness of the situation settling over them. Here she was, a woman alone with a strange man, dependent on his goodwill and honor. Her father would say she had gone from one danger into another, but something in August Garrett's straightforward manner and honest eyes made her feel safer than she had felt in weeks. After the meal, August prepared to ride into the nearest town, a place called Parowan about 10 miles north. I should be back by nightfall, he said, checking his saddlebags. Remember what I said, stay inside, stay quiet, and if you hear anyone coming, get in that cellar. I will, Margaret promised. She watched from behind the curtain as he rode away on a sturdy roan gelding, heading north across the valley. Then she was alone in a stranger's house, in a land she did not know, with pursuers somewhere behind her and an uncertain future ahead. She should have been terrified, but instead she felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since her father announced her engagement, she felt like she could breathe. Margaret spent the afternoon cleaning the house, needing to do something to occupy her hands and mind. She swept the floors, washed the dishes, and prepared a stew with the supplies she found in the pantry, using salt pork and dried beans and the last of some root vegetables. It felt good to work, to do something normal and domestic while her thoughts churned. August Garrett was an enigma. He had risked himself for a complete stranger, had lied to dangerous men on her behalf, and asked nothing in return. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with the lean, hard build of a man who worked with his hands. There was something in his eyes, a sadness or a weight, that suggested he had known his share of hardship. She wondered what his story was, what had brought him to this isolated valley to work a small ranch alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple when Margaret heard hoofbeats. She froze, her heart racing, but then recognized the roan horse. August was back. She met him at the door as he dismounted. They are in Parowan, he said without preamble. 3 men matching the description of your father's hands, asking questions about a dark-haired woman. They are staying at the boarding house and have let it be known that there is a reward for information. Margaret felt her stomach drop. How much? $50, August said. That is a lot of money out here. People will be motivated to look. $50. It was a fortune to most people in the territory. Margaret sank into a chair, feeling defeated. Then it is only a matter of time before someone points them in this direction. August pulled up another chair and sat across from her. Not necessarily. I made sure to be seen in town, talked to a few people, mentioned that I was looking for a ranch hand to hire. I said my cousin from Colorado was supposed to be coming to help but had not shown up yet. If anyone asks, you are Matthew Curtis, my cousin, and you arrived yesterday. We keep your hair hidden, you wear men's clothes, and you stay away from town. As far as anyone knows, I just have a ranch hand helping out. Margaret stared at him. You want me to pretend to be a man. I want you to stay alive and free, August said bluntly. Those men will be looking for a woman alone. They will not be looking for a ranch hand working alongside me. It is not a permanent solution, but it will buy us time. Time for what? Time to figure out a real plan, August said. Look, I know this is not ideal, but your options are limited. You can ride out on your own and likely get caught within a day or two. You can turn yourself in and go back to that marriage. Or you can trust me, at least for a little while, and let me help you. Margaret thought about Vincent Halloway's cold eyes and clammy hands. She thought about the life that awaited her as his wife, bearing his children, running his household, dying slowly inside year after year. Then she looked at August Garrett, this cowboy who had already risked so much for her, and made her choice. All right, she said. I will be Matthew Curtis, your cousin from Colorado. What do I need to do? August's face relaxed slightly, and she realized he had been genuinely worried she might refuse. First, we get you looking more like a ranch hand. Your brother's clothes are a start, but they are too clean, too new-looking. I have some old work shirts and pants that might fit you better. We need to make you look like you have been working cattle, not playing dress-up. Over the next hour, August helped Margaret transform herself. He gave her worn shirts and pants that had been mended multiple times, a battered hat, and a pair of gloves with holes in the fingers. He showed her how to bind her chest to flatten her figure, how to walk with a longer stride and stand with her weight differently. He even had her practice speaking in a lower register, keeping her words short and rough. The key is to avoid talking to anyone if possible, he said. Keep your head down, let me do the talking. If someone does address you directly, grunt or nod, most people will not look too closely at a ranch hand. They ate the stew Margaret had made, and August complimented her cooking, saying it was the best meal he had eaten in months. They talked carefully, sharing bits of their stories. August told her he had grown up in Kansas, that his father had died when he was young and his mother had remarried badly. He left home at 16 and drifted west, working various ranches before saving enough to buy this piece of land 2 years ago. It is not much, he admitted, looking around the modest house. But it is mine. No one tells me what to do, no one takes what I earn. That freedom is worth more than a big spread with a boss looking over my shoulder. Margaret told him about her life in New Mexico, about her mother's death, and her father's increasing obsession with wealth and status. She told him about Vincent Halloway, about the way he looked at her, and the casual cruelty she saw in how he treated his servants and animals. He would have made my life miserable, she said quietly. I know my father thinks I am being selfish, that I should sacrifice for the family. But I cannot do it. I cannot give away my whole life for his business dealings. You should not have to, August said firmly. A marriage should be a choice, not a business transaction. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling in the stone hearth. Margaret found herself studying August's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands rested easily on his knees. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, and there was a gentleness in him that contrasted with his hard exterior. She felt safe with him, truly safe, and that was a gift she had not expected to find. You should take the bedroom, August said, breaking into her thoughts. I will sleep out here by the fire. That is not right, Margaret protested. This is your home, I can sleep by the fire. You have been sleeping on the ground for 5 days, August said. You need a proper bed, I insist. Margaret was too tired to argue further. She thanked him and retired to the small bedroom where a simple bed with a quilt waited. She lay down fully clothed, ready to spring up if danger came, but exhaustion overtook her quickly. For the first time since fleeing her father's house, she slept deeply and without nightmares. The next morning, August woke her before dawn. Time to look like a ranch hand, he said. We have work to do. Margaret learned quickly that ranch work was hard and unrelenting. August set her to mucking out stalls, mending fence, hauling water, and a dozen other tasks that left her muscles aching and her hands blistered despite the gloves, but she did not complain. She was grateful for the work, for the way it tired her body and occupied her mind. and she was grateful for August's patient instruction, the way he showed her how to do things without making her feel foolish for not knowing. They worked side by side through the day, speaking little but developing an easy rhythm. August was a good teacher, and Margaret found she enjoyed learning these practical skills. She had been raised to run a household, to manage servants and plan meals and do needlework, but this was different. This was real work, the kind that produced tangible results. In the afternoon, a neighbor stopped by, an older man named Jim Powell who owned the spread to the east. Margaret's heart hammered in her chest as August went to greet him, but she kept working, head down, just as August had instructed. "Got yourself some help, I see," Powell called out. "My cousin from Colorado," August replied easily. "Matthew Curtis. He is not much of a talker, but he is a good worker." Powell waved in Margaret's direction, and she raised her hand briefly without looking up, then returned to pounding a fence post. She held her breath until Powell and August finished their conversation and the neighbor rode away. "You did well," August said when he came back. He did not suspect a thing. 3 days passed in this manner, settling into a routine of work and watchfulness. Margaret found herself adapting to the physical labor, her body growing stronger even as her hands grew calloused. She and August fell into an easy companionship, sharing meals and small conversations. He told her stories about his years drifting from ranch to ranch, the characters he had met, the wild places he had seen. She told him about her childhood, about her mother's kindness and the books she loved to read. "I always wanted to travel," Margaret admitted one evening as they sat outside watching the stars emerge. "I wanted to see San Francisco, maybe even sail to Europe. My mother used to tell me stories about Paris and London. Now I suppose I will never see any of it." "Why not?" August asked. "You are young, you have your whole life ahead of you." "I am a fugitive from my own family," Margaret said bitterly. "I have no money, no prospects, no future except hiding or running." August was quiet for a long moment. "You know," he said slowly, "there might be another option." "What option?" He turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were serious. "You could stay here. Not as Matthew Curtis, but as yourself, as my wife." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "What? Hear me out," August said, holding up a hand. "I know we barely know each other, but think about it practically. If you were married to me, your father could not force you into another marriage. You would have legal protection, and those men chasing you would have no claim on you." "A marriage of convenience," Margaret said slowly, trying to process what he was suggesting. "If that is what you want to call it, yes," August said. "I am not asking for anything you are not willing to give. We could have separate rooms, separate lives if you prefer. But on paper, in the eyes of the law, you would be Margaret Garrett, and that would keep you safe." Margaret's mind raced. It was a logical solution, but the idea of entering another arranged marriage, even one framed as protection, made her stomach churn. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I ran away to avoid being forced into marriage. How is this different?" "Because I am offering, not demanding," August said gently. "And because you could leave any time you wanted, I would never hold you against your will. This would be a choice, your choice, but I understand if you need time to think about it." Before Margaret could respond, they heard the sound of multiple horses approaching fast. August was on his feet instantly, his hand on his revolver. "Get in the house," he ordered. "The cellar now." Margaret ran, her heart in her throat. She lifted the floorboards and dropped into the root cellar, pulling the boards back over her head and plunging herself into darkness. Above her, she heard August's boots on the floor, moving to the door. "Evening," she heard August say, his voice carrying through the floorboards. "Can I help you, gentlemen? We are looking for Margaret Catherine." It was a different voice this time, deeper and more authoritative. "We have information that suggests she may be in this area." "I told your friends a few days ago," August said. "I have not seen any woman. It is just me and my cousin working this ranch." "Your cousin," the man said skeptically. "I would like to meet this cousin." Margaret pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to keep her breathing quiet. She heard August's boots move across the floor, heard the door open. "Matthew." August called out. "Get over here." There was a pause, and Margaret realized with horror that August was calling for her. He wanted her to come out. She could not imagine what he was thinking, but she had to trust him. With shaking hands, she lifted the floorboards and climbed out, making sure her hat was pulled low. She walked to the door, keeping her eyes down. "This is Matthew Curtis, my cousin from Colorado," August said. Matthew, these men are looking for a woman who ran away from home. You seen anyone like that? Margaret shook her head, keeping her posture slouched and her expression bored. She was acutely aware of the men studying her, of how close they were to discovering the truth. She could smell their sweat and horse scent, could feel their eyes on her. He does not talk much, August said. Took a knife to the throat in a bar fight a few years back, damaged something. He can talk if he has to, but it pains him, so he keeps quiet. It was a brilliant lie, giving her an excuse to stay silent. Margaret stood there, hands in her pockets, trying to embody every ranch hand she had ever seen, bored and tired and wanting to get back to work. "Where are you from, boy?" one of the men asked. Margaret pointed vaguely north and west, then shrugged. "He is from Sterling, Colorado," August supplied. "That is where my mother's sister settled. Matthew here was not getting along with his stepfather, so I offered him a job." The man who seemed to be the leader stepped closer, and Margaret recognized him from her father's ranch. It was Wade Morrison, her father's business partner and friend. If anyone would recognize her, it would be him. She felt sweat trickle down her back despite the cool evening air. "Look at me, boy," Morrison commanded. Margaret slowly raised her eyes, keeping her expression neutral. Morrison stared at her for a long, heart-stopping moment. She could see him taking in the dirty work clothes, the smudged face, the hat pulled low. She willed herself not to tremble, not to give anything away. "He is just a kid," one of the other men said dismissively. "Come on, Wade." "She is not here." Morrison continued to stare, and Margaret thought her heart might burst from her chest. Then, finally, he stepped back. "Maybe," he said, "but I am not convinced. We will be watching this place, Garrett. If we find out you are lying to us, it will not go well for you." "I am not lying," August said calmly, "and I do not appreciate being called a liar on my own property. Now, if there is nothing else, my cousin and I have work to finish before dark." The men mounted their horses, but Morrison looked back at Margaret one more time. "You take care, boy," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. "This is dangerous country for young people." Margaret nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the barn with measured steps, every instinct screaming at her to run. She did not let herself look back, did not let herself react until she heard the horses ride away. August found her in the barn a few minutes later, sitting on a hay bale and shaking uncontrollably. "You did perfectly," he said, crouching in front of her. "You were absolutely perfect." "He did not recognize you?" "He was looking right at me," Margaret whispered. "He knows me, August. He has been to our house dozens of times. If he had looked any closer, but he did not," August interrupted gently. "Because you are a good actress and because people see what they expect to see." "He expected to see my ranch hand cousin, so that is what he saw." Margaret looked up at him, at this man who had risked everything for her, and felt something shift in her chest. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really, it cannot just be because of your mother. You could be killed for helping me." August sat down beside her on the hay bale. "Honestly, at first it was about my mother, about doing what I wished someone had done for her, but now—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Now it is about you. About who you are and the courage you showed by running. You could have given in, could have accepted your fate like so many women do, but you fought back, you chose yourself, that is worth protecting." Margaret felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I am so tired," she admitted. "I am tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of looking over my shoulder." "Then stop running," August said. "Stay here, marry me, not as a prison, but as a partnership. We could build something together, something that belongs to both of us. I am not asking you to love me, Margaret. I am asking you to give yourself a chance at a life that is yours to choose." Margaret looked into his eyes, those storm cloud blue eyes, and saw only honesty there. She thought about the offer he was making, about the life it represented. It was not the glamorous future she had once imagined, with travel and adventure and European tours. But it was freedom, it was choice, it was a life where she would be a partner, not property. "All right," she said softly. "Yes, I will marry you." August smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face and made her heart skip. "You will not regret this," he said. "I promise you that." They were married 3 days later in Parowan, in a small ceremony at the church with the circuit preacher officiating. Margaret wore a simple dress that August bought for her in town, pale blue with white lace at the collar. She kept her hair pinned up under a bonnet, still nervous about being recognized, but August had spread the word that his cousin had gone back to Colorado and his bride was arriving from Salt Lake City. The few people who attended the wedding had no reason to question the story. Standing before the preacher, holding August's calloused hands in hers, Margaret felt a strange mixture of emotions. This was not the romantic wedding she had dreamed of as a girl, no family or friends surrounding her, no long white gown or elaborate celebration. But as she spoke her vows and saw the steady reassurance in August's eyes, she felt something she had not felt in months: hope. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, August kissed her gently on the forehead, a chaste and respectful gesture that somehow meant more than any passionate embrace could have. They were partners now, bound together by law and mutual choice. They returned to the ranch as Mr. and Mrs. Garrett, and August insisted on carrying her over the threshold despite her protests. He set her down in the kitchen, and they stood there awkwardly, suddenly very aware that they were married strangers sharing a home. "I meant what I said," August told her. "You can have the bedroom. I am perfectly comfortable out here. We do not have to. That is, I am not expecting." "I know," Margaret said, touched by his consideration. "Thank you for that. But August, we are married now, perhaps. Perhaps we could share the bedroom, not for anything improper, but just to sleep in the same room. It seems strange otherwise." August looked surprised, then pleased. "If that is what you want, I can bring another mattress in there. We can put it on the floor beside the bed until we know each other better." They spent the evening rearranging the bedroom, setting up a second sleeping space. It was domestic and ordinary and somehow perfect. That night, lying in the darkness with August's steady breathing nearby, Margaret felt safer than she had in years. The days turned into weeks, and Margaret settled into her new life as Mrs. Garrett. She managed the household while August worked the ranch, and often she joined him, learning to ride fence lines and move cattle. She discovered she was good with horses, patient and gentle in a way that earned their trust. August taught her to rope and brand, to read the weather and the land, to shoot a rifle and a revolver for protection. They grew closer slowly, carefully, like two wild animals learning to trust. August would tell her stories while they worked, about his years as a drifting cowboy, the strange towns he had seen, and the characters he had met. Margaret shared her love of books, and August surprised her by riding into town and returning with 3 novels he thought she might enjoy. They would sit together in the evenings, Margaret reading aloud while August carved pieces of wood or mended tack, the lamplight warm around them. One evening, about 6 weeks after their wedding, Margaret looked up from her book to find August watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," August said slowly, "about how much better this house feels with you in it." "How much better my life feels." Margaret set down the book. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I know this started as an arrangement, a practical solution to a problem, but it has become more than that for me. You have become more than that." August moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa. "Margaret, I need to tell you something. I did not expect this when I offered to marry you. I thought we would be friends, partners, maybe nothing more, but I have fallen in love with you, completely and irrevocably in love with you. And I know you did not sign up for that, so I will keep it to myself if you want. But I needed you to know." Margaret's breath caught. She looked at this man who had saved her, protected her, treated her with unfailing kindness and respect, and realized that somewhere along the way she had fallen in love with him too. "August," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face, "I love you too." "I think I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it." He kissed her then, not the chaste kiss from their wedding, but a real kiss, full of passion and tenderness and promise. Margaret kissed him back, pouring into it all the feelings she had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I think," Margaret said with a shy smile, "we do not need 2 mattresses anymore." August laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed her again. That night, they became truly husband and wife, their marriage consummated with love and desire and a profound sense of rightness. Margaret discovered that being with a man you loved, a man who loved you in return, was nothing like the cold duty she had feared with Vincent Halloway. It was beautiful and tender and passionate, and she fell asleep in August's arms feeling cherished and whole. The months that followed were the happiest of Margaret's life. She and August worked the ranch together, building up their herd and improving the property. They talked about their dreams for the future, about maybe expanding the ranch, about children someday. Margaret taught August to read better, sitting with him in the evenings and helping him practice. August taught Margaret to handle a horse like a true rider, to move cattle and rope strays. But their peace was shattered on a cold morning in late autumn when riders appeared on the ridge above the ranch. Margaret was hanging laundry when she saw them, and her blood turned to ice. There were at least 8 men, and even from a distance she could see they were armed and looking for trouble. "August," she called, running toward the barn where he was working. He emerged, took one look at the riders, and his face went grim. "Get in the house," he said. "Load all the guns we have. This is going to get ugly." The riders descended into the valley and surrounded the house. Margaret recognized her father immediately, sitting tall on his black stallion, his face hard and cold. Beside him were Vincent Halloway, Morrison, Brewster, and several other armed men. "August Garrett," her father called out. "I know my daughter is in there. Send her out and there will be no trouble." August stepped out onto the porch, his hand resting on his revolver. Margaret stood just inside the door, a rifle in her hands, her heart pounding. "Margaret is my wife," August called back. "Legally married before God and the law. She is not going anywhere." "That marriage is not valid," her father snarled. "She was already promised to Mr. Halloway. She had no right to marry without my permission." "She is 21 years old," August said. "She does not need your permission. The law is on our side, Mr. Catherine. You have no claim on her." Vincent Halloway spoke up, his voice oily and dangerous. "I paid good money for that bride price. I have a contract with her father. She belongs to me." "A woman is not property to be bought and sold," August said, his voice hard as steel. "Now you men need to turn around and ride out of here before someone gets hurt." "You are outnumbered, Cowboy," Morrison said. 8-1. "You cannot win this fight." "Maybe not," August agreed, "but I guarantee some of you will not ride away from here, so you need to ask yourselves, is she really worth dying for?" There was a tense silence. Margaret could see the men shifting in their saddles, weighing their options. She moved to stand beside August on the porch, the rifle in her hands. "I am not going with you, father," she called out, her voice clear and strong. "I would rather die than marry Mr. Halloway. August is my husband and I love him. That is never going to change." Her father's face turned red with rage. "You ungrateful girl, after everything I have done for you, everything I have provided, you throw it all away for some dirt-poor cowboy with nothing to his name." "He has his honor," Margaret said. "He has his kindness, he has his love. That is more than Mr. Halloway could ever offer me with all his money." Vincent Halloway's face twisted with anger. "You little whore, you think I would want you now, sullied by another man? You are worthless to me." "Good," Margaret said coldly. "Then you have no reason to stay." "There is still the matter of the bride price I paid," Halloway snarled. $5,000, I want it back." "That is between you and her father," August said. "We owe you nothing." The standoff continued, tensions rising. Margaret could see fingers twitching near holstered guns, could see the calculations happening in the men's eyes. She knew August was right, that if shooting started, people would die. She prayed it would not come to that. Then a new voice spoke from behind them. "Seems to me you gentlemen are trespassing on private property and threatening violence against a married woman. That is against the law in Utah Territory." Everyone turned to see Sheriff Ben Tucker riding up with 3 deputies, all armed and looking serious. The sheriff was an older man with gray in his beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He positioned himself between August's porch and the assembled riders. "Sheriff," Richard Catherine said with forced pleasantness, "this is a family matter. My daughter ran away and married this man without my permission. She is of legal age," the sheriff said flatly, "and I have seen the marriage certificate. It is all proper and legal. She has the right to marry who she chooses." He looked at Vincent Halloway with open disdain. "As for you, sir, there is no legal bride price in this territory. Any money you gave this girl's father was a gift, not a contract. You have no claim on Mrs. Garrett." "This is outrageous," Halloway blustered. "What is outrageous?" the sheriff said coldly. "Is 8 armed men surrounding a ranch and threatening violence. Now I am going to give you boys a choice. You can turn around and ride back to New Mexico Territory peacefully, or I can arrest the lot of you for trespassing, making threats, and disturbing the peace." "What will it be?" Margaret saw her father's jaw clench, saw the fury in his eyes, but he was not a stupid man. He knew when he was beaten. "This is not over," he said, looking at Margaret with something close to hatred. "You are no daughter of mine. Do not ever come back to my house." "I would not dream of it," Margaret said, and was surprised by how little pain she felt. This man who cared more about business deals than his own daughter's happiness was no loss to her. The men turned their horses and rode out, their threat diminishing with distance. The sheriff waited until they were out of sight before turning to August and Margaret. "That was a near thing," he said. "I am glad Jim Powell came into town and told me there might be trouble out here. He saw those men gathering and thought you might need help." "Thank him for us," August said, relief evident in his voice. "And thank you, Sheriff. I do not know how it would have ended if you had not arrived." "I have a feeling you would have handled it," the sheriff said, looking at August with respect. "But I am glad I could help. You two take care now, and Mrs. Garrett, welcome to Parowan. I hope you will be happy here." After the sheriff left, Margaret and August stood on the porch, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. Margaret leaned against August, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "It is really over," she said wonderingly. "They are gone. My father disowned me. I am free." "You were always free," August said softly. "From the moment you made the choice to run, but yes, now it is official. You are Margaret Garrett, my wife, and no one can take you away from me." Margaret turned to face him, seeing the love in his eyes, the strength and goodness that had drawn her to him. "I love you," she said. "I know I say it often, but I need you to know how much. You gave me back my life, you gave me a future, you gave me love when I thought I would never find it." "You gave me the same," August said, cupping her face in his hands. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me feel alive again. You made this house a home. You are everything to me, Margaret." They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Margaret thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. She had run away from one future and stumbled into another, better one. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with a cowboy who had been brave enough to hide her and face down her pursuers. That winter was hard, with heavy snows that kept them close to the house for weeks at a time. But Margaret did not mind. She and August spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and making love under piles of quilts. They made plans for the spring, for expanding their herd and planting a garden, and all the mundane details of building a life together. In February, Margaret realized she was pregnant. She told August one morning over breakfast, watching his face transform from surprise to joy to something like awe. "A baby," he whispered, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Margaret asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy." August came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Margaret, I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am more happy than I knew a person could be. You are giving me a family, a real family." Margaret held him tight, feeling tears of joy slip down her cheeks. "We are going to be good parents," she said. "We are going to love this child and protect them and let them choose their own path in life." "Always," August promised. The baby was born in late September of 1879, a healthy boy with dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. They named him Thomas, after August's father who had died when he was young. Margaret had never known love like she felt for this small person, this perfect combination of her and August. She would hold him and marvel at his tiny fingers, his rosebud mouth, the way he would stare at her with such trust and need. August was a devoted father, helping with the baby whenever he could, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, making silly faces to earn his son's first smiles. Margaret would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love for both of them. The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the ordinary challenges of ranch life. They had good years and hard years, times when the cattle prices were high and times when they struggled to make ends meet. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. 2 years after Thomas was born, Margaret had a daughter they named Eleanor after August's mother. She was a beautiful child with her mother's dark eyes and a stubborn streak that made both parents laugh. 3 years later came another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved to follow his father around the ranch. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. August and Margaret worked hard, building up their herd, improving their buildings, hiring seasonal help during roundup and branding time. They became respected members of the Parowan community, known for their honesty and hard work and the clear love they had for each other and their children. Margaret never heard from her father again. She learned through occasional letters from old friends that he had lost much of his wealth in bad investments, that Vincent Halloway had sued him for return of the bride price and won, that he had become a bitter, isolated man. She felt sadness for him, but no regret. She had chosen the right path, even if he could never see it. On their 10th anniversary, August took Margaret on a trip to Salt Lake City, their first time leaving the ranch together since their wedding. They stayed in a hotel, ate at restaurants, visited shops, and Margaret bought books she had dreamed of reading. But the best part was simply being alone with August, remembering why they had fallen in love, renewing the commitment they had made to each other. Do you ever regret it? August asked one night as they lay in the hotel bed. Giving up the life you could have had, the travel, the adventure, all the things you wanted as a girl, Margaret thought about it honestly before answering. I would be lying if I said I never wondered what it would have been like to see Paris or sail the ocean. But no, I do not regret it, because everything I truly wanted I found with you. Love, partnership, a family, a life that is mine to shape, that is worth more than any grand tour could ever be. I love you, August said, pulling her close. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Margaret whispered. My cowboy, my hero, my home. They returned to the ranch refreshed and happy, to children who had missed them and a ranch that had survived their absence. Life continued its forward march, seasons turning, children growing, love deepening. When Thomas was 16, a young man who looked so much like his father it made Margaret's heart ache, he asked about her family, about why he had never met his grandfather. Margaret and August decided it was time to tell their children the full story of how they met, about the forced marriage and the desperate flight, and the cowboy who had been brave enough to risk everything for a stranger. The children listened in rapt attention, Thomas and Alina and James sitting around the kitchen table as their parents shared the story of their beginning. When they finished, Alina had tears in her eyes. That is so romantic, she said. Papa saved you. We saved each other, Margaret corrected gently. I gave your father a reason to be brave, and he gave me a chance at freedom. That is what love does. It makes you better than you thought you could be. I want a love like that someday, Alina said dreamily. You will, August assured her. But you will choose it for yourself. No one will ever force you into a marriage you do not want. I promise you that. Thomas looked at his father with new respect. You faced down 8 armed men for mother. I would have faced down 100, August said simply. When you love someone, really love them, you do not think about the danger. You just think about protecting them. Margaret reached across the table and took August's hand, and their children saw the look that passed between them, the deep and abiding love that had sustained them through more than 15 years together. More years passed. The children grew and started their own lives. Thomas took over more of the ranch work, learning everything his father could teach him about running the operation. Alina married a schoolteacher from Cedar City, a kind man who loved her fierce spirit and sharp mind. James went to university in Salt Lake City, the first in the family to seek higher education, supported every step of the way by parents who wanted him to have every opportunity. August's hair turned gray at the temples, and Margaret found lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But they were still in love, still partners, still best friends. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the same mountains they had watched together for so many years, and feel grateful for the life they had built. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party. The ranch was filled with friends and neighbors, music and laughter and food. As Margaret danced with August under the stars, she thought about the girl she had been, terrified and desperate, riding through the desert with no plan and no hope. She thought about the cowboy who had hidden her and faced down her pursuers, who had offered her safety and freedom and eventually love. What are you thinking about? August asked, holding her close as they swayed to the music. About how lucky I am, Margaret said. About how one decision, one moment of courage can change your entire life. If I had not run, if you had not helped me, where would we be? Apart, August said seriously. And I cannot even imagine that. You are so much a part of me now that I cannot remember what my life was like before you. I love you, August Garrett, Margaret said, looking up into his eyes, those storm cloud eyes that had been the first thing she truly noticed about him. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for as many years as God gives us. And I love you, Margaret, August replied. My runaway bride, my partner, my everything. They kissed there in the dancing light, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, and Margaret thought that if she could go back and tell that frightened girl in the desert what her future held, she would never believe it. would never believe that running away from one marriage would lead her straight into the arms of true love, that a desperate escape would become the greatest adventure of her life. The years continued their march. August and Margaret grew older together, their love deepening and mellowing like good wine. They became grandparents, watching their children raise families of their own. They saw the ranch they had built with their own hands passed down to Thomas, who ran it with the same dedication and love they had shown. When August was in his late 60s, he fell ill with a fever that worried Margaret terribly. She nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, remembering how he had cared for her during a bout of influenza years before. When he recovered, weaker but alive, they held each other and wept with relief. "I am not ready to lose you," Margaret had whispered. "You will not lose me for a long time yet," August promised. "We still have years ahead of us. I want to see all our grandchildren grown. I want to dance at their weddings. I want to grow old and gray and sit on that porch with you when we are too tired to do anything else." And they did. They saw grandchildren marry and great-grandchildren born. They watched the turn of the century come, bringing new technologies and changes they could never have imagined as young people. They saw automobiles replace horses in town, though they themselves stuck with the old ways on the ranch. On a warm summer evening in 1921, when Margaret was 64 and August was 68, they sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and red, painting the mountains in shades of fire. August held Margaret's hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "Do you remember the first time we sat here together?" August asked. "The night after your father's men came looking for you." "I remember," Margaret said softly. "I was so scared I thought I would never feel safe again." "And now I know what it means to be truly safe," Margaret said. "Not because there is no danger in the world, but because I have you beside me. Because we built this life together, this home, this family, I am safe because I am loved." August raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You gave me everything, Margaret, everything I never knew I wanted or needed. You made me the man I am today." "And you saved me," Margaret said. "Not just from that marriage, but from a life where I had no voice, no choice, no power over my own future. You gave me freedom, August. You gave me myself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, holding hands as they had for more than 4 decades. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and well-maintained, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Lights glowed in the windows of the houses their children had built on the property, family nearby but not on top of each other, just as August and Margaret had hoped. "I would do it all again," August said suddenly. "Every moment, every struggle, every hard year and good year, I would choose you again and again in every lifetime." "As would I," Margaret said, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "You are my great love, August Garrett, the love of my life. Everything good in my world came from the moment I rode into your valley asking for help. And I looked up and saw the woman who would change everything," August said. "The woman who would make me believe in love again, in hope, in the possibility of happiness." They kissed then, a soft and tender kiss that held 43 years of love and partnership and devotion. Around them, the ranch settled into its evening rhythms, children called to bed, animals settled in their stalls, the wind whispering through the cottonwoods that August had planted the first year of their marriage. Margaret and August Garrett would sit on that porch for many more years, watching their family grow and thrive, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. They had started with nothing but courage and desperation and kindness, and they had created a legacy of love that would endure for generations. And on quiet nights when the stars were bright and the air was clear, they would tell each other the story one more time. The story of the woman who was fleeing a marriage she never agreed to, and the cowboy who hid her and faced down her pursuers, and how that one brave act led to the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. It was their story, their truth, their forever, and they never tired of remembering how it all began, in dust and desperation, and the first stirrings of a love that would last a lifetime and beyond.